All right. Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to today's Quick Bites education event about expanding retail distribution via compelling data-driven sales decks. Before we get started, Naturally Bay Area would like to thank our generous sponsors. Their contributions allow us to bring you this educational programming and create opportunities for community building. Special thanks to our newest silver level sponsor, Spins. Just a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. Today, we'll be making use of both the chat function and the Q&A. You'll find both by mousing over the bottom of your screen and click chat to open that box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'd love for you to say hi and introduce yourself, tell us what company you're representing today. And if you have any questions for our featured panelists, please submit those using the Q&A box also at the bottom of your screen. It'll just help us stay organized, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can towards the end of today's event. And now I'm pleased to introduce today's moderator, Mary Tarczynski. She's a Naturally Bay Area board member and is principal and client solutions lead at Parabolic Agency. Mary, I'll hand it off to you.
All right, thanks, Monique, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon, I guess, unless you're further west than California. I'm gonna, as the sponsor lead, I wanna add my thanks to our sponsors also, especially to Aspect and New Hope, who sponsored our recent Pitch Slam, in addition to being a 10K level sponsor with some of the other brands you see here. This community not only provides the finances that pay for our part-time staff and our software and insurance and all those things you need to run a nonprofit, but also provides really good information. And a lot of our webinars are led by some of our sponsors, and we're happy to have them as part of our community, helping all of us become better sellers of natural products, makers and sellers. So this webinar is particularly just a joy for me because I've been using data to sell my entire career. My first job after business school, I have a master's in marketing research, so I really learned a lot about data there. And then I worked for Nielsen on the Kraft account, setting up a database for Kraft Foods. And then I moved when they had won that account. And then I moved to Coca-Cola and I worked in category management when Coke had what they called at the time new beverages, but it was all the juices and teas and waters that became a much larger part of the portfolio over the past 2 years or the past few decades than they were in the early 90s. But I was running around the country, making charts, trying to convince bottlers and retailers to carry our new products because of the growth of some of the competition. So from the very early days, I've been using data to sell. And now my agency, Parabolic, we're a shopper marketing agency, but we help brands with sell-in and sell-through. And obviously that sell-in part has to do a lot with positioning your products for the retailers to accept them. But I'm really pleased to be joined by this panel today because they all work in this every day versus this just part of what I do. And they'll introduce themselves a little bit more fully later, but Alan Pierce from Navigator Sales and Marketing, he's got decades of leadership experience and founded this company 15 years ago, and they're a SoCal-based broker, but they also have a foundation called the Lighthouse Foundation, and they're helping emerging brands, diverse-owned brands, get on the shelf and improve representation at retail. Some of you might have been at the webinar in January where his co-founder, Sabrina, talked about some of the work they're doing. Benji Fitz from Spins he worked in retail analytics for Whole Foods and then moved over to the data side. He'll tell you more about his background, but he helps emerging brands every day. So he's got great wisdom to share on how to get creative when you maybe don't have all the POS data that you need yet. And then Lori Olson, who is my client at Good Foods. I've been working with her for a couple of years, and she also works in data every single day and is very good about knowing, what's statistically significant and what's not, and what you can use when. So we have a great panel today, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing from him. And there's definitely time for you to ask questions in the chat and also at the end. So CPG, we're lucky because in today's day and age with digital marketing, there is an abundance of data created. And I kind of organize this on what you get if you're just starting out as a brand, on the digital side and the e-com side. You've got any kind of social you're doing, maybe some media, certainly your e-com orders. You've got all that data that as an emerging brand, you will have right out the gate that you can leverage with retailers. Then on the right-hand side, once you're in store and once you're able to get some Spins or Nielsen data or direct data from your retailers, you're going to have some of these other metrics that are more sales related And the most important piece of data that you have when you talk to a retailer is velocity. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But really, all of this data has a role, and it's a matter of how you organize it to understand your business, understand what changes you need to make, and of course, position that to tell the retailers why you deserve a spot on their shelf. So again, what we're going to talk about today is how do you uncover, out of all this sea of data, how do you uncover the insights that are most relevant to retailers, and how do you present them in a compelling way to secure new distribution and merchandising? So like I said, we'll have have our panelists talk a little bit one at a time and introduce themselves. So we're going to start with Alan with a question of, why do facts and insights matter to retailers?
Thank you very much, Mary. As Mary alluded to, I started Navigators Sales and Marketing because we wanted to bring diversity and inclusive product lines, and also innovative product lines to the marketplace. And they were having a tough time getting on shelf. Now, to the question, why do facts and insights matter to the retailers? Imagine that you're going into a buyer as a broker, and I am trying to convince that broker to take your product and to take another product off the shelf to make room for your product. So your facts and insights are strategically important, and that's the first impression that buyer is going to have. What Parabolic does to make you look good as far as your presentation is the only thing they understand, because imagine a category and they've got tens of hundreds of product lines, hundreds of SKUs in that category, and they're trying to decide what to bring in and what not to bring in. The data has to be relevant. I mean, most buyers don't care if that buyer is in Southern California. They don't care what's happening in Northern California or on the East Coast. They want relevant data to their marketplace. So, I mean, that gives you a little, and that's the beginning of the presentation. That gives you a little insight on what happens to get you on shelf.
Thank you, Alan. All right, so Benji, over to you. You're an emerging brand, you're bootstrapping, maybe you're just getting out there, first couple runs. How can you access meaningful data if you don't have POS data yet?
What's up, guys? My name's Benji. I am a senior manager on the best practice team here at Spins, and I work with syndicated data all the time. But let's say you're just starting out and you don't have access to syndicated data, right? There are a lot of resources out there that can help flesh out your sell story, right? So the sell story is a document that you're going to take to retailers to kind of like pitch your product. You know, it's your pitch deck. And a sell story is a blend of like qualitative and quantitative data. And in a little bit, we'll kind of talk about the differences there. But I want to talk about one free resource anybody in this room can go use like right now. And you should go to trends.google.com. And what that website will do is tell you the search interest in like a term, like a diet or whatever. And this slide that I'm presenting here actually was kind of inspired by a client. So let me tell you the purpose of this. They said, I feel like the healthy eating surge that happened in January of this year was a little muted compared to years prior. So what we did was we looked at trends data, and we looked at the Google search interest for lose weight, okay? And this has always been pretty predictable. If you look at here, the first marker at 1/7/2018, the Google search interest for losing weight always peaks in January, right? You know, and then it kind of meanders a little bit. And then right about the time of year that a pumpkin spice latte is released to the public, it just goes down like a rock and it doesn't come back until the following January, right? So we see that again in 2019, same pattern. And we see it rebound again in 2020. But what happened? It ended early, and then the maximal amount of search interest for losing weight was actually right after all the lockdowns ended in 2020 in May. People were done eating sourdough and drinking for breakfast or whatever they were doing way back when. And that's when people were super interested in this. This is like this mega peak of interest in losing weight. Predictably, it kind of fell down again, came back again in January. But what we saw recently, though, was this big fall off and a muted rebound at that 80% mark right there, which was the lowest January interest in losing weight that we'd seen in 5 years. It was amazing. And we think that that's probably due to like the prevalence of the Omicron variant at that point in time. It was just like blasting all over the country. And the neat thing about this, so this data is all from Google Trends, but we actually, in another version of the slide, we actually mapped it to our syndicated data, and we found that like product sales for like things like protein powders and rice cakes exactly matched this trajectory too. So that was pretty cool. So the other neat thing about it is the fact that it is also the dates in it actually map up to SPINS' end dates too, if you ever do trended data. So that can be kind of cool. But there are other sources of quantitative and qualitative data. You know, a good sales story is a blend of both. A couple websites I really love are Grocery Dive and Food Dive. I read those like every day. We've got a couple other things here. You know, research from universities can be really good too if you kind of have a more sciencey sort of product, or if you have that sort of audience. Brokers, you know, can be a great source of information. We also have a liftoff plan that SPINS offers, which I'll go into a little bit more depth later on the call, where it's kind of a blend of consulting time and access to our database, which is really great. But you know, make sure that you're always taking the numbers, the hard numbers that you get there, and you're blending it with like your story, you know, and also the kind of data you get from a lot of like marketing sources, your website, you know, your social media type stuff, what you hear from vendors and retailers and your customers and buyers. If you tie all that together, it can make a really good, powerful story to tell to a retailer.
Thank you, Benji. And I know we get this question all the time. And so it was really nice to see what you've done with the trends and to kind of put this list together. You know, the stuff on the bottom is all free. It's just your time, right? That's definitely, and Google, right? It's just your time to put together your story when you go onto the retailer until you start getting that hard data on how your sales are doing. So Lori, let's talk about velocity, because we know that that's the most important metric, right? Because it's how much money that retailer is going to make when they take a product out and put yours in. So talk about your experience using that number. Sorry, I probably should have put a good foods picture in here, but just a serial one on how the retailer makes those decisions.
We'll talk about that later, Mary. So, you know, velocity is a measure that can help any sales executive or any broker, anybody that's challenged with going to a buyer and selling in their item. It is a way to keep the story simple, at the same time packing a punch. So to kind of piggyback on what Alan was talking about, as well as Benji, you know, the data is what's most important at the end of the day. We live in a fact-based selling world now. The anecdotal way is going away and has been going away for a long time. So what are some easy facts? What are some easy guaranteed base hits that we can leverage with the data that we have? And velocity is one of them. Velocity is the productivity of an item, or the productivity of a brand, or the productivity of a category. So for emerging brands, if you're a new brand, you have new items, and you are really trying to get on the shelf, a great way to leverage your brand as well as your category is to look at the overall health of the category from the velocity lens. A little rule that should always be considered when we're looking at velocity is the amount of ACV that a particular brand or a particular item that you're trying to sell in has. You want to keep the threshold from at the very, very lowest, and Benji, I know you might raise an eyebrow at me, 5%, but 10%. 10% is kind of that safety zone. If you've got 10% ACV or 10, you know, within that range of ACV, that's when you know that velocity measure is going to really, really serve its purpose and is really a true measure and a true representation of your item or your brand. Now, if you don't have that threshold, right, of ACV, leverage the overall category if you have to. If you can't leverage a specific ACV around an item, try to leverage your brand or the strength and velocity of how your brand is positioned, utilizing SPINS' great attributes, you can group your products in with those attributes to get a velocity number that way. And then you can also it's not a bad thing to present other brands within the category as a leverage to help sell your brand in. Brands can live in harmony on the shelf together. And at the end of the day, yes, we want our brand to be number one. We want our brand to be at the top of the ranking list. But at the end of the day, sometimes to get there, you have to leverage the success of other brands on the shelf, and you have to leverage their velocities and how much those velocities and those brands have brought to the category overall, to help get you there. And that's, kind of that category manager, category captain best practice approach. So if you want something simple, if you want to be able to speak to your buyers, your brokers, have those collaborative conversations and keeping it simple, definitely leverage velocity measures as much as possible. And anytime those velocity measures maybe, get a little tangled or seem a little bit hard to speak to, of course, our LinkedIn information is available, and you guys can always reach out to me anytime.
Thank you, Lori.
You bet.
Yes, and I'm going to show an example of this in a moment, but if you don't have, kind of dovetailing on what Lori said, if you don't have enough distribution yet to have statistical significant velocity, right? You're not in retail yet, or you're only in a few stores, you're only in some local stores that maybe aren't covered by SPINS data. There are some other metrics you can use in the beginning, and you can use the size and growth of the category, the subcategory. Again, I'm going to show you an example of this in a moment. How things are going. You can certainly put in your pitch decks, what your retail distribution is, how many stores you're in, which key accounts you're in. You can show your demand on e-com sales. Particularly, you can talk about your repeat rate for your e-com sales and the dollars per year. Like, hey, on my e-com, we've got 45% of our customers repeating, and they're buying $200 a year or $150 a year, whatever that is, so that retailer will know, like, okay, if I take somebody else out and put you on the shelf, I'm going to feel confident that you're going to hit my velocity, my dollars per store per week, which might be $10 or $20 or whatever that metric is for that retailer in that category. And your social engagement also shows, some momentum, right, for your brand, your followers, your engagements, any press you're getting, ratings and reviews, PR, et cetera. Those are the metrics you're gonna always have in your pitch deck, but they're going to be a little bit more important, to organize and showcase until you build up that velocity story. And the example I wanted to show, and I think Pauline is maybe in our audience today. Pauline from Twirl Tea was grand prize winner in our annual pitch slam, which was just a couple weeks ago. And she didn't have velocity yet, right, in this slide in her deck, but she shows category growth, which she got from reports. This is not signing up for data yet. I know now because she won, she's going to get a SPINS package. But prior to that, she just showed how much ready to drink tea is growing, what the projection is for milk tea, and just showing how milk tea and bubble tea are, second only to water, right, in terms, or tea is second only to water in terms of size, and how this subsegment is growing. And so this is just one page of her deck, but it's a great example of presenting the information based on being scrappy and the kind of data she could find. She also did a really nice job presenting this. Pauline has a design background, and her deck and all of their packaging and everything is beautiful, but she did a nice job of putting that together. And presentation matters. I'm going to show a couple of quick slides, and this one, sorry, it's all pixelated, but this was a project I worked on with Lori a couple of years ago, and they had some data on what was happening in the dressing category. But if you put this in a retailer deck, where does their eye go? Like, how do you make sense of this? But the after slide looked at this, and we were promoting the sale of salads, by taking on their fresh dressings. A beautiful appetizing salad. I mean, who's not going to look at that and go, oh my gosh, it's lunchtime, I'm hungry. And then a very simple point, I can't read it because my screen's in the way, but clean ingredient refrigerated dressings are up 25%, while conventional brands are down 36%. So Good Foods in color, green up 25%, the competition Red down, down 39%. So, took some complex data and made a very compelling point, when you're taking a retailer through a deck quickly, or you're sending it, that they can get it and go, okay, this category is on trend. I should pay attention to this brand. One more example, this was for one of Navigator's brands, Yoro, and they had this insight in their deck. So good information about millennials, wanting to take care of themselves and prioritizing self-care, but kind of, sort of a lot of information to process and some duplicity in the numbers and the data. So we just simply redesigned it and it looked like this. And this is obviously in context of the rest of the deck, but all of a sudden, you saw appetite appeal in the version before. Here you're seeing a human, she's working out, she looks great, right? So it just connects emotionally that, yes, this is for products for people like her, right? People who exercise and use supplements and are health conscious, and the numbers are really big and compelling. And so it just helps tell that story a little bit better. So once you organize the information, how you present it makes a difference, and you're selling to another human, right? And you want to appeal to them emotionally. So I'm going to have each of our panelists tell a little bit about other success stories they've had using data. And sorry, the way we did this in order, Lori, you're back up again to talk about your recent sell-in with food service.
Sure. So for those emerging brands out there who have found themselves challenged with, how can I build a impactful sell story for the potential food service customers that you're going after, right? The POS data that you would get from SPINS, or even just some general POS type data you can get from Google or from the internet. The food service world of data and crafting a sell story is so different. So how can you maximize your investments in your data that speak to both your selling in the retail world as well as the food service world? One success that we've had recently with our food service team, we have a fantastic food service team that is growing here internally at Good Foods. They are all over building, fact-based sell stories that are going to make an impact. Our food service footprint, while we're definitely getting some traction compared to our retail footprint, there's a difference, volume wise. However, the opportunity to leverage our POS retail data came into play recently within a food service selling story. And it was just a basic looking at two categories within the same overarching category of dips, and explaining to the buyer and to the brokers that, look, here are two categories that ride side by side, right? That consumers, the consumer usage is about the same. You've got one category that has owned the space in the food service world for a long time. However, new categories are emerging on the scene that are beginning to source volume from that legacy category. And it was one simple slide leveraging the CAGR of the existing category against the new category, and showing how the existing category was beginning to decline and the new category was beginning to increase. And that was based off of POS data. But that data, that simple story of one declining, the Goliath is starting to decline and the David is beginning to increase, that easy breezy, simple visual data point made quite an impact on the meeting, on the sales presentation.
Great example. Thanks, Lori. I think that's a good one to remember. Everyone loves a David and Goliath kind of story, and retailers are always looking for innovative, new items. What's next? Benji, why don't you tell us about Good Jam and how you were able to help them?
Yeah, so sell stories aren't just really for retailers, right? You can get a lot of mileage out of kind of reshaping your sell story to talk to investors, And so we had this client, Good. They were a Icelandic keto jam company, amazing, and they had done a couple self-stories with us, but they really wanted to flesh out a pitch deck to investors that kind of explored different categories, other than what they were primarily in. And, investor decks are kind of a different beast, right? Because as opposed to talking about like brand versus brand comparisons and velocity and stuff like that, they're really more about the size of the market and the direction of the market and the potential, right? And so we worked with them to kind of like build out a deck that explored a lot of different areas that were, adjacent to kind of what they were currently doing. And we got the good news that they closed a $20 million round of funding a couple months ago. So very exciting for them.
That's awesome. And Alan, you want to tell us about Black and Bold Coffee and how they were able to use some data and then kind of what they had to do, right?
Yeah.
For the retail level as well.
Well, Black and Bold was a Shopify brand that was doing pretty good in Shopify, and they wanted to be a retail brand. And they had a few hundred stores that they were in Target, and they came to Navigator Sales and Marketing, and they wanted us to see if we can get them a little bit more of a footprint in retail. And my good friend and wife, Sabrina Pierce and Kathy Telemonte, got them into Albertson SoCal, about 343 stores. Now, as far as their velocity, they weren't necessarily hitting the mark. But if you know anything about Kathy Telemonte, the next thing she did was get a national meeting with Albertson Safeway. And Albertson Safeway was going to check the numbers in SoCal to see if that brand was going to fit as a national brand. And that was probably one of the first questions that happened on that Zoom call. Well, anyway, what Kathy and Sabrina and the owner of Black and Bold did was put together a strategy to get to the velocity to where they wanted it to be, which included Albertson Safeway buying more product, more product than they had, and also bringing in shippers. Make a long story short, they got 1,700 stores at Albertson Safeway across the country. And you can take a lemon and turn it into lemonade. I mean, you can have the numbers fit your argument the way you want it to fit, and it did fit, and it is doing well. Some of those divisions have already ordered 2 and 3 times, and it's only been in the stores for about a month.
That's a great story. An example of how a brand went from e-com to getting into stores to getting national, right? And then now that momentum will help them with other retailers. So, and having a great broker. I'm going to let our panelists, I'm going to stop sharing so I can check the question while we do this, but talk a little bit about, some of the things that have worked for them in their organization and some changing environment and things to think about for the future. So we'll do that for a few minutes and then take questions, other questions. But Lori, can you kick us off with talking about how the process works? You're in a little bit larger organization. If you've got a retail pitch coming up, how do you prepare for that, and what's your process, and who do you work with?
Well, I think that as far as speaking to the question that came in, if you're a startup, I think that it starts with your relationships with the different companies that can provide data. So you may not be at a place where you're ready to pull the lever on a big purchase of data. However, if you have a partnership or even just a relationship established with a data provider, there are lots of opportunities to purchase small slices of data and to leverage the capabilities of not only the data that's available, but also the internal resources with the people. Spins is a perfect example in that they have been such a great partner with us as we have gone from a small brand in the retail space to a much larger brand, with a more impactful footprint across distribution. We leveraged every available resource that Spins had, whether that be specific types of data, small slices of data, or customized data pulls. as well as the people within the organization that were experts on understanding the different categories. So, those resources that are available with your partners, are always good jumping off points to leverage. And again, it starts with the partnership and the relationship that you have with some good data providers.
And I would also say, do your homework on the retailer. So some of you may have recently attended, Sprouts did a webinar, and it was definitely fishing for private label brands, right? For things that they could take private label, but they did share a lot about their customer and their strategy and their digital strategy and things like that, that you can, Lori and I were just talking about this morning, that you can like play back when you go to present to them, like, hey, our consumer is aligned with your shopper. Hey, we're on trend with the things that you want. What do they say? Healthy my way, or healthy for me, gluten-free, keto, et cetera. So make sure that when you're presenting to a retailer, that something about that retailer. You've gone to their store, you've gone to a few of their stores, right? You've looked at the set, you've taken some pictures of the set, you've studied, you've listened to their, if they're a public company, you've listened to their investor calls, you've done your homework on their website and things like that, so that you show how your product fits their corporate strategy. And I know that Spins, probably helps with some of that. And I know our sponsor Bedrock helps with that.
Well, and Alan, being in the broker world, leveraging your relationships with your brokers as well. And if you don't have a relationship yet, leverage your networking, whether it's with through LinkedIn, or just colleagues that you've worked with in the past. Reach out to brokers. We've had some great experiences with some of the brokers that we've used here at Spins, as well as some brokers that I've used in previous life, where there's always a willingness to reach out and just provide some insights or provide some direction, as a jumping off point. And that's for emerging brands, that is golden.
And that's definitely the power of the network. I actually did that recently. I had to do a shopper marketing program for Stater Brothers. And I'm like, oh, Stater, it's been like a couple decades since I've done something for them. And I was able to call a friend who calls on them, and she was able to give me some information. And I sent an intern in store to take pictures and, leverage my network to do that. So that's a really good point, especially when you're a scrappy brand. Benji, can you talk a little bit about how it's changed during the pandemic and all these Zoom meetings and shorter attention spans, like specifically in your world, because you lived it before this happened? What are you doing differently the past 2 years than you were doing before?
Well, don't make like a 40-page deck and go into a meeting to bore someone to death. Okay. So nobody has time anymore. Meetings are often now virtual, that's just the norm, it's kind of here with us to stay. And, just make your point simple and brief. And always be the hero. It's your sell story, one simple trick, look at a slide that you have in your pitch deck and squint your eyes at, right? And if the primary message is invisible, you have done a bad slide. Rework it, right? People should feel the insight and the message before they understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a high bar, but you can do it. And I think it's really powerful when you can do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So consider your audience, consider how much time you have, consider how data savvy they are. That's a huge variance right there. And that can affect whether you're talking about dollars TDP or average weekly dollars per store selling, So make it simple, make it quick, make it succinct, make it sweet.
Yeah, good advice. Alan, why don't you talk about, you guys are in the stores a lot. So talk about what's happened, particularly in the past year, post-pandemic, once everything got messed up, right? With
Yep.
labor and supply chain. So how is that affecting you guys as brokers? How should that affect how brands are pitching?
Well, as far as you emerging brands out there listening to this, you're going to get a lot more questions in the buyer's meeting about your supply chain. They want to know where you source your packaging. They want to know where you source your ingredients. They want to know where you assemble your product. And they want to know if there's any problems. Okay. That's coming. All right. The shorter supply chain you have, if you're local, that's great. All right. The other thing is these retailers don't have the workers they used to have in their stores. So if there's anything you can do, I mean, look at your brand as not only the product, but also the services around your product. If you have a broker that does merchandising, you might consider investing in merchandising because you're actually doing the work for the store for them. You know, if they tell you that you're in 100% of your of the grocery of the rooftops you're supposed to be in, I guarantee you you're not in 100%. You're in 80%. Well, what's going on with the other 20%? Well, it's sitting in the back room. Why? Because they don't have the workers anymore to make sure you're up on shelf. I would encourage you to invest in merchandising for the first 30, 60, 90 days. If you're in a new retailer, first 30, because you're going to have to get those workers, those few workers that are there, accustomed to taking your product and putting it on shelf. Okay, that is key right now. Still, there are still problems in the retail operations of grocery stores on all levels. Okay.
So just to answer a comment in the chat, what I meant by post-pandemic was post-pandemic surge, right? Every CPG saw huge sales in March and April of 2020, and we've been trying to recover from that ever since, right?
Yep, that's correct.
So that's when kind of the whole the post-pandemic CPG surge, I guess, is what I meant by that. All right, well, I have a few resources to share with you guys, and then we will take questions in the chat. And I know that Catherine, my friend, you had a comment about where to get data, and we actually have that next. So, you know, you've heard about, we listed a bunch of things for free sources of data. Benji, just give us an overview of this new product from Spins. And I think I'm still confused between Liftoff and Launchpad. So maybe you can explain that and how folks can get started. And we're going to put this information in the follow-up email as well.
Well, Liftoff, Launchpad, point is you'll be blasted off into space, you know, so this is like a really cool product. And basically, you can get access to syndicated data, you know, from conventional channels, the natural channel, which is proprietary to Spins, even some key accounts, you know, which is really great. You get an access subscription to Satori, which is like it's like the website you log into where you like extract and pull and, you know, analyze data, right? But you also get two other cool things in here that I'm going to specifically call out. One is Power Tabs. So that's an Excel-based reporting solution that is like delivered to your inbox, you know, once you set it up with our team. And it kind of gives you performance management dashboards for like a selected subcategory in a couple geographies, you know. So you just get a report as soon as the data is refreshed, because that's every month, in your inbox, and you can like share that around with your folks in your organization. That's super cool, right? But the other really great thing about this is you get access to the Jumpstart program, which I actually manage. And the Jumpstart program is basically 20 hours of consulting time that you get to spend with my team. So like real people, real humans who have a lot of experience, who will learn about what your goals are in the next year. And over the first 60 days of your kind of contract with Spins, we kind of just help you do personalized training. We help you write that first sell story. You know, we can help you like how to better use our database, or if you got a big meeting coming up or something like that. We have done so many pitch decks for folks to help them out and get those wins really quick in their subscription. So it's a great service. I love it. And I'm so proud to be able to work with all the over 250 brands who have signed up for it in the last 2 years. So.
That's awesome. And as a reminder, you know, Twirl Milk Tea won this package as part of their Pitch Slam package. And if you are not a member of Naturally Bay Area and you would like to become a member for $75 a year, I think Kelsey's going to put that in the chat. We will send you, they'll send you the recording from Pitch Slam so you can kind of see the brands that presented and some really good, you can see the full deck that Twirl had and some of the other, we had some amazing, 7 brands that presented. And the Current Foods was our first prize or second prize winner in that recent event. A few other resources from our community, and then we will take some more questions. So again, I've talked about Navigator. They're a national broker focused on, grocery primarily, but regional and national. They also have the Lighthouse Foundation for Diverse Owned Brands. You can contact Alan or go to their website. They take in a new kind of cohort every year for training. I've done some training from them and met some great brands. And there's a lot of other experts they bring in for that community. Parabolic, you've heard a little bit about, thank you, Alan and Lori, for your comments. We help brands with putting together those sales stories and, helping have a really good, really compelling presentation. As a design agency, we've also made videos for people to send, during the pandemic where you can't get a meeting, you send a little link and it's like maybe a 30-second, 60-second, 90-second video. We do trade ads, in UNFI and things like that. And then of course we help the sell through part of it is helping with your specific shopper marketing plans. If you get on the shelf at Whole Foods or Sprouts or Target or multiple retailers and you need to kind of make sure you're getting shopper awareness and trial. And then Bedrock, they're not here today, but they help consolidate all of your POS data and do visualization. They know all the retailers and their specific templates, so they can help you with that. Kroger has a certain format, et cetera. Omnium is one of our other sponsors. They're going to be on a webinar coming up, but they help brands with predictive analytics and how much is a point of distribution worth, what's your pricing and promo strategy be, helping you measure velocity, baselines, et cetera. And they also started a podcast, which we're going to have on an upcoming webinar. And I'm going to do that first before the questions, just so you guys can see this. They're actually going to do Bricks and Clicks Live in October, featuring Heather Cooper, who's she's been in the national community for a long time, was at Cliff Bar and Kite Hill. And we'll talk about some of her experience in the industry. So these are our upcoming events. We've got a 4-part series on financial topics, kind of in this inflation, is that what it is? Recession kind of climate. I know it's inflation, but what, is it a recession or not? But we've had 2 already. And then there's, and those are on our website if you want to catch them. And then there's 2 coming up this fall, borrowing money in mid-September, and then becoming profitable in early November. We're also going to talk about supply chain, big issue right now. And we are planning, we're going to have TBD on the exact date, but category review trends and retail insights with top buyers will really help you prepare for next year. That was one of our most popular sessions last year. And then we are planning an in-person session. So that is what's coming up. But Monique, can you help us with any other questions? I know we have like a minute or so left that came up. Okay, any tips, Lakey? Any tips on negotiating slotting ad requirements? That is something that Omnium could help you with, but since they're not here today, Alan, do you have any advice on negotiating ad requirements at a retailer meeting and how to use data for that?
Well, the only thing I've seen that it has worked is, first of all, be willing to ask for less. I mean, be willing to ask to pay less. You will be surprised how simple doing that will help you reduce in costs. And a lot of CPGs don't do it because they think that's the price and that's what I got to go with. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm poor. I can't afford all of this. What can I do to get in your book or your ads? And you'll be surprised, depending on that buyer's feel that day, them helping you out.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen a lot.
And they have other goals besides just collecting that vendor income, right? Which they need to get from Kraft and Mondelez and P&G. They have goals for emerging brands that people want. They have goals for diverse owned brands, right? So you may be fitting those requirements and be able to leverage that as part of your business.
And remember that Kraft and Mondelez are in there every week. The thing they don't get is emerging brands. They don't see emerging. So when they get one they like, they're going to do everything they can do to put it on shelf.
Yeah. And Sasha, you asked the question a bit. Can you become a member if you're not in the Bay Area? You certainly can, but you might want to go to naturallynetwork.org because there are naturally affiliates all over the US. Boulder was the original, Bay Area, Chicago, Austin, San Diego, LA, New York. So, there may be one that's closer to you that might be better. But right since the pandemic started, we've been doing a lot more digital education, and most of them are free. So you're welcome to attend any of the events, and then you can maybe join the one that you might be doing in person at. All right, I think that our time is up. Thank you so much, Alan, Benji, Lori. You guys were fantastic. And thank you to Monique and Kelsey, who were behind the scenes. And thank you all who attended. This was a pretty good group. Really appreciate the questions and the interactivity in the chat. You will get an email with the recording in a couple of days, and our contact information if you have any follow-up questions. So really appreciate you guys engaging with us, and hope to see you in September when we do the next financial series. So have a good rest of the summer and a nice Labor Day.